Done. You don't need to ask twice. Just send address.
Oh my God, yes. I'll take out.
Just one for the entire
get
team.
in on that.
Please. Thank you.
One benefit of the pandemic is we now have First Avenue, like basically anything we can put our logo on, you can, we have it.
You guys have stickers also?
We have stickers. We have a couple different designs. We have puzzles. We have a cribbage board, playing cards.
Wow.
Coming soon, shower curtain. We got a roller and a grinder. We have about 15 different new t-shirts.
Marco Shea just put in the chat, do you have throw pillows?
Ooh, that's a good one.
That is a good one.
I took a note.
What's up, Marco Shea?
There we go.
All right, I think we're live on YouTube. We're just waiting for Jim to show up, but we're really excited for today's episode.
Yeah, get things started. Welcome back, everyone. We are excited for our first in conversation with in 2021. If you have not set your chat settings to all panelists and attendees, please do so we can address all your questions as best as possible. And today we are at episode number 64. We couldn't be more excited for this one. As always, I have passed it over to Henry to get the episode started. And also, if you have not joined us on YouTube yet, please make sure to subscribe, follow our YouTube channel. That's the best way to go back and see all of our previous webinars and stay updated on when we go live. So I'm going to pass it over to Henry and we'll get this episode kicked off.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, well, if we're going to get started, then maybe somebody want to cover Jim's section, but I'm going to go ahead and kick this off because welcome back to TM 101. And if you've been here before, you guys know that we've had a lot of rock stars on our show before, but none more relevant to the current state of the industry than today's guest. She's the president and CEO of First Avenue, the iconic venue in Minneapolis, and the president of NIVA, the National Independent Venue Association. So everybody, please welcome Miss Dayna Frank. Yay. We're really happy to have you here.
Well, I'll take Jim's question until he comes on. Dayna, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, your formative years with music, and how you became the president of First Avenue.
So I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a suburb right outside called Golden Valley. It's about 15 blocks, due west from where I'm sitting in my house right now. And I grew up, my dad was an accountant. He worked in and around the music industry. He was the accountant for Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis in Flight Time and represented a lot of athletes. He was not the owner of First Avenue when I was growing up. First Avenue was started by a guy named Alan Fingerhut, who was the heir to the Fingerhut catalog fortune, who at 25 years old saw an abandoned bus depot in downtown Minneapolis and thought it would make an awesome rock club. And so, I grew up, I went to a suburban high school, public school, and then I went to NYU for college, wound up living in Los Angeles for a little over a decade, working in film and TV production before my dad, who had wound up as the sole owner of the building and First Avenue operations in 2004. He had a stroke in 2009. And I was in the middle, I think, of a film pilot, a TV pilot shoot, and got the call and flew home, I think, almost immediately and tried to figure out where we could go next, as far as the family, the now family business was.
So Dayna, you were talking earlier a little bit about your decision to stay independent. In the time when you came to your ownership of the club, can you tell us a little bit about the decision process that you had, what you thought about at that time?
Yeah, I think staying independent is an active choice. I don't think a lot of people stay independent just by virtue of circumstance. And for us, it certainly was deliberate. We felt like we could best serve the community of Minneapolis and our artists and our employees by remaining solely accountable and having the authority to make decisions only based on the best interests of our community and employees and artists. And you give up a lot when you give over that control, right? And so we just always wanted to be able to act with the authority and with the spirit of community. I technically own 100% of First Avenue, but I view myself much more as like a trustee, and like I'm the shepherding it through this era of its history for a future generation when they can take over and shepherd it through the next generation. So
you're definitely the steward of that magic from our perspective, for sure. You talked about decisions, that you had to make, perhaps selling, not selling. Can you talk a little bit about, what the challenges were that you faced? And I'm going to hand this off to Jim, just, to get into what you faced as you found yourself in the position of having full ownership. Where do you go from here?
Yeah, it was a time. Sorry, I wasn't sure if Jim was gonna jump in. Hi, Jim. So it was like right around when my dad had a stroke, and I kind of came back being like, oh, I wonder who I'll sell. I was very happy in my TV executive life. So I was like, oh, I wonder who I'll sell this to, Live Nation or AEG. And I hadn't really been home in maybe a decade or so. And I just, it's such a visceral, emotional memory for me, like, showing up and opening the doors and walking into the club, and like all of my like formative years, it just hit me, because like I said, I grew up, a half a mile this way. The club is half a mile that way. And so all of my experiences, like part of, what makes me who I am happened like in that room. I mean, I had my first kiss in that room. I had my first kiss with a girl in that room. I had
Cue Katy Perry.
A lesbian and married to a woman. So it's like, I, had my first kiss with a boy and a girl right in that room. I like spent every Sunday night of my teenage years, like dancing at Sunday night dance party. It's where I like, had the best nights of my life. And I saw artists that I idolized, and I like kind of developed my own voice and became who I was like right in that room. So, and
your family didn't have ownership, or did at that time?
No, they didn't. So
you were just a fan in the room. So this is literally a part of the fabric of your growing up, not because you had ownership.
Totally. Yeah. So,
wow. Yeah.
Probably a lot like everyone listening here, like, music became like the singular driving force of my teenage angst and teenage expression. And it's how I like defined myself and gave me like a reason to live through the dark years and so going to shows it was just, again, just like a formative part. And so I think walking back in after a decade and experiencing that and remembering everything it meant to me, to be a girl from the suburbs, like taking the bus downtown by myself, probably lying to my parents about where I was going, and having that experience and knowing how important it was to have a place to do that. I mean, I wouldn't be the person I was if I didn't have First Avenue when I was 13 years old. So it became like it all washed over me and became so much more important to keep that alive and to keep that spirit alive and to keep it like truly accountable, like to those kids and to the local community that I gave up my life and refocus my life in that direction.
5-1, you want to go from there?
So what did you do as far as improvements when you took over?
Yeah, so I came in with I was a film producer. And so I didn't have any knowledge of like live music production or facilities management or booking or like any of the kind of like music industry experience. But what I did know is that like a dirty club is fucking sorry, can I swear?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
We're grown. We're grown. We're grown in its roadies. So yeah, we drop a bomb all the time, or two,
Okay.
or six.
You know, I did know that like a dirty club was fucking disgusting and I didn't want to walk around in it. So, you know, I was able to be like, why can't we clean this up? And it's like,
Right.
oh, I guess we can clean this up. You know, there were other kind of, my dad was an accountant. And so everything was kind of very much P&L based. And I think I had more of that creative, you know, I went to like art school at NYU and I had much more of like the creative experience. And so a lot of times there were decisions I made that were much more like intangible, you know, like why should artists have to walk through a crowd to get to their bus? Like, why can't we improve that experience? And, you know, while it's not directly related on the P&L, it became kind of, the experience became, I think, better, and it maybe indirectly got us more shows or something like that. But it was really about like, we just want to be the best club and the best experience. And if we can make it better at all, we're going to do that. And I will say it was definitely a team effort. There's some, you know, managers on the ground that have been at First Avenue for decades longer than I have. You know, Nate Kranz, the general manager, and Sonia Grover, our head talent buyer, and Conrad, our legendary stage manager. So I want to make sure it was, you know, it's not just like me doing this, but it was really a team of us that like took a look at the experience, the customer experience, the artist experience, the employee experience, you know, from 20 minutes before they arrived at the club until 20 minutes after. And we're like, how can, like, every single thing was examined. How can we make this better? And if we figured out a way we could do it, we did it.
The chat loves Conrad.
Everyone loves
We love Conrad. I love
too.
Conrad.
Yes, we did like one of our like a distance live stream show last night, and it's like seeing Conrad there watching over the stage was like, oh, all is right with the world. Like,
Right.
we're gonna get back.
We're waiting for all the forces to align so we can click it together.
I'm so happy that it finally clicked in my head why you guys have, like you were saying, the added value you brought to the venue, like adding the artist's headliner bus parking. You had the space, because I get it now, because it used to be a bus depot. You had the space. That must have been the garage where they worked on it back in the day. That's really cool to know.
All this interesting history is amazing for sure.
Yeah.
Dayna, so when you moved back from LA to Minneapolis and you were taking over things, did you get any pushback? Not only, you know, being young, but also being a woman. Did you get a lot of pushback when you came back on board?
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge. I mean, both, family businesses and the next generation is always hard, even in the best circumstances, but certainly, you know, walking into a very male dominated field. And at the time, almost everybody was a man when I started. And, you know, I was 20 something and kind of being thrust in the position of managing people that were not only like decades older than me, but had been at the job for that much longer. You know, it was challenging to say the least. And also, you know, just the attitude in our industry, right? Like a little bit of gruff, like, you know, a little bit of just, you know, hard work, sweat, tears. Like no one's in our industry because, like I said, like, because they get rich or there's like a great work-life balance, or, you know, it is an intentional choice and you give up your whole life to do it. And so, you know, I just never let it bother me. And I kind of kept my nose and I was like, okay, I'm just going to do the work. I'm just going to do the work. I didn't go in with like, maybe because I didn't grow up with it as like my birthright, or I hadn't known I was going to take over, been bred to take over, really, right? It was something I kind of stumbled into in a weird way. You know, I didn't come in with like a sense of entitlement or any kind of airs. Like I did every single job. I had, you know, people puke on me on the front door. I plunged toilets. I, you know, had to kick drunk people out of the club. I swept cigarettes off the street. Like I just kind of dug in and was like, I want to know every single bit of this business and how, you know, I was very fortunate in that I did that so that I could figure out how to make it better. And that is certainly a privilege that I had coming into it. But, you know, I think people saw that I did dig in, I did the work. I never have asked anyone to do anything that I wasn't willing to do myself. And I think after a couple of years, and I think that showed through. I was also, always in it for the long haul. It was never like, I'm going to jump in here for a couple of years and flip it and sell it. At every employee meeting, it was like, we're going to stay independent. It's my pledge to you that this will always be a community driven, like employee and artist focused business. And we've kept it that way. So I think that built some trust and relationships over the long term.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I'd say you built up a lot of grit by dealing with all of that, and it's amazing. I'd say the attitude you went into it was really the right way of working with as a team, and I think that draws parallels that we've had with other episodes of you didn't know how to do any of that stuff before, but getting in and working with the people that were there and trusting and empowering and building up a team is exactly like tour managing. And so that's really cool that you were able to do that. And you have made it. I said earlier that, like, I remember First Ave a long time ago before you took over, and it was honestly a really shitty punk rock club, and it was just poorly laid out. And then now I was saying that, like, it really has built up. It's become so much better and cleaner, and has this sense of rapport to it, similar to like a Fillmore or a House of Blues. Like, exactly what you're going to get and how you're going to be treated when you go to First Ave. And so kudos to you and the entire team for making it what it is today.
Thanks. I mean, certainly one of the biggest challenges we have is making the room better, but not changing it at all, because it is like so iconic. And I think everybody who grows up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, or even Minnesota or upper Midwest, like, you walk into that room and like, it's still the same today. It has the same vibe, the same aura. Like, there's we try to like improve sight lines and the kind of ADA and stuff that we can do. We've changed the placement of a couple bars, but I think it doesn't ever feel like it's been given a whitewashing or a total transformation. And that's really, really important to us, to always make sure that it has that sense of place and history.
Yeah. Dayna, was there any one turning point that you feel leveled the playing field for you?
There were a couple moments. I mean, certainly the collapse of our ceiling in 2015 was like a great kind of equalizer, where there was no way to know that it was coming. It was just like one of those, it was a plaster and lath ceiling that was 80 years old or whatever at the time, and we couldn't tell that the system was failing until one day it just came down. And so that was a real moment where employee, owner, everyone was just on the same team of like, oh my God, we just have to get open as soon as possible. We didn't want to be like the great white story or have it, have that be kind of how we ended. And we're like, we have to reopen. We have to show the world that we're going to reopen. We have to make the building safe first and foremost. And really.
And when you reference the great white story, you're talking about the Providence fire, right?
Yeah.
For those who may not have caught that reference, when she says that they didn't want to become the great white story, that is that terrible fire that started from some pyro incidents in Providence, Rhode Island, took some lives, cost a band a career, and really was terrible. So just for reference on that.
Yeah, thanks, Adrienne. Sorry. Yeah, we really we wanted to show that we could get past this and we could open up safer, that this was, we could kind of take it as a moment in time, but we didn't want to let it define us as a venue. So, and yeah, the other definitely the Prince, when the 3 days after Prince passing, we held all night dance parties. Because we really were like, okay, what would Prince have wanted? How do we celebrate this man that has given us not just First Avenue, but our city and our community and our culture and the world, this amazing gift of his life and his music. How do you celebrate somebody like that? That means everything. And we're like, well, Prince was a night owl and Prince loved partying and celebration. And so we think that, how we could best honor him would be to do all night dance parties, and just celebrate. And so that's what we did. We got a special permit from the city that let us stay open, not with liquor, but in Minneapolis, you can't even stay open past 2 a.m. So we got a special permit that let us, and then we were like, okay, well, how else can we honor Prince? And we're like, okay, Prince loved 777, right? The last time he played First Avenue was July 7th, 2007. And so we're like, well, we got to go until 7 a.m. and we got to do it 3 nights in a row. So I think the Prince lovers will understand. We're like, okay, we're gonna go 777, and that's how we can best honor Prince. And so we did
2777 9311.
And those pictures of people in the street are amazing. The roads were clogged with people. First Avenue was surrounded, and people were there all night. It was amazing.
Yeah, and you guys will love this. So we had sold out shows every single night, and so we did the times where you had like shows, the concerts will end at 10, load out, bands, dance night started at 11, and we did it 3 nights in a row. We did it successfully. It was just a real, like, you say equalizer, like everyone was on the same page, like working to make this event happen in this like truly like just magnificent, benevolent form. It was all free. And everyone worked for, we played the employees obviously, but like the DJs, like it was all of this just like great celebration. It wasn't financially minded or anything like that.
Dayna, that brings me on to talking about the history of the venue. And Prince is synonymous with First Avenue. I grew up in Scotland, and I was aware of First Avenue even before I'd started touring. So you exist in this space where you almost are a historic building as well as a functioning music venue. So it really resonated with me when you said you feel like a custodian of the room. That's a really nice way to put it. And I can speak from experience of the first time when I arrived in Minneapolis to play at 7th Street. The history's right there on the wall. It's front and center. All those names, Babes in Thailand, Husker Du, and then everyone who's ever played the room they're on the outside of the building. So it's right there for people to walk by and see. But can you walk us through, for anyone who's maybe not super familiar with the room, the early foundations of the venue itself?
Yeah, so it was founded in 1970. It was an old Greyhound bus depot that they had moved across the street in 1968. And so it also happened to be where Alan Fingerhut, the founder, and my dad went to play pinball as kids. They would like sneak out of their house and go to the bus depot and play pinball. And so they were familiar with the building. And Alan had inherited a bunch of money at 25 years old and was like, this would make an awesome rock club. It was right around I think the Fillmore was 1968 and kind of like the invention of live music as an industry. And so he took over the lease in 1970. First show was Joe Cocker, Mad Dogs and Englishmen, and they operated it like a live music venue for maybe a year. Couldn't make it work financially, and so Alan brought in a discotheque operator from Kansas City. I think it was called American Amusements was the corporate name, but they ran it as Uncle Sam's, and it had like a multicolored floor, and it did disco dance nights. There were like maybe some shows, but they were very much like secondary to like the disco nights. So they American Amusements operated, I think, about 10 different cities. They did it until 1977, 78, like late 70s, when they went bankrupt. And so it turned back over to local control to a guy named Steve McClellan, who was the booking manager. He was a former security bartender that booked the shows, and a guy named Jack Myers, who was the kind of back office manager who did all of like the insurance and the kind of backroom stuff. And they took it over and they started operating it. They couldn't afford a new sign, so they just took off the uncles and called it Sam's. And they booked shows. They did other dance nights, kind of more like new wave or punk, or kind of not just disco nights, until they renamed it First Avenue, which is the street that we're on, in 1980. And then they opened the smaller room called 7th Street Entry, which is so First Avenue is a 1,500 capacity. The entry, as we call it, is a 250 capacity, and it's actually in the old coat room of the bus station. So they put like a little stage in the corner and a little bar, and then they had this like kind of more of a CBGB's kind of punk rock emerging club, which became the home to Husker Du and the Replacements and Babes in Toyland and the Minneapolis scene at the time. Prince played there, one of his first shows also, before quickly graduating to the main room.
Yeah, and just a small note, having played my first show in the city there, it is, as those, especially in the US and the UK, those little 200, 300 clubs, they can be pretty Spartan. They can be very rock and roll, but it sounds great in there. There's a good PA. My experiences in 7th Street are great. It's a cool little room and it sounds good. It feels good.
I saw the Smashing Pumpkins open for Lemonheads in the entry. I was one of like 20 people there. Saw Danzig there. I mean, I saw Circle Jerk. Saw a lot of bands that went to be bigger playing with 20 or 30 people.
I saw Billie Eilish play there in 2019, something like that. It was just one of the, like those are the rooms that you have those kinds of experiences, I think, where you're like, oh wow, like I'm like alive again. This is what it feels like.
You had mentioned Steve McCullen earlier. I mean, he was the booker for First Avenue in the early days, all the way back into the 2000s. Briefly, what was his role in making the club such a cultural powerhouse?
Steve, who I'm waiting for people in the chat to say they know Steve, had like the biggest personality, like the most just, yes, we fucking can attitude, and loved music and loved new styles of music. It's really, Minneapolis in the late 70s was a very, very segregated town. You had like black clubs and you had white clubs, and very much you had like clubs that wouldn't, mix audiences. So maybe it wasn't exclusively like the club, but also definitely the nights. It was very segregated. And Steve was one of the first people in town to be like, I don't understand why we're doing this. Like, yeah, we're gonna have a mixed audience and we're gonna have mixed bands, and really like made his own rules. And anytime he heard of an amazing band from the coast or from a different town, he'd be like, yeah, we're gonna bring them here. I don't care if it sells 20 tickets. The people of Minneapolis need to hear this music, and was just like a music lover first and foremost. Jim, I think you mentioned, became famous for the comp tickets you got walking out the door.
Yeah.
So not just papering the room with like shows you can't sell, but like fucking amazing comps. Like, I talk about like walking out from a Sunday night dance party, like, a $1 dance party, and I got a Sonic Youth comp ticket. It's just like mind blowing. So
yeah, I rarely paid for shows, because if you went often enough, especially for the dance nights, you'd walk out with a single comp. So they always hope you'd buy one, but hopefully your friends, we'd trade tickets to see which shows we wanted to go to, or try to get doubles if we could. But you always walked out with 5 or 6 tickets to a show. And I saw bands I would have never been interested or knew nothing about, just because I had that opportunity.
Yeah,
That's such a brilliant customer acquisition tactic. It's brilliant.
We also discussed how we as tour managers and business people would lose our minds when you're in a 1,500 capacity venue and you find out that the promoter gave away 200 tickets for free. We would lose our minds now if that were to happen.
Also, the fire department, you never know how many people are coming to the show, right? Because you could have 200 comp tickets out there, or did we do 1,000 comp tickets? Like, and how many of those are going to be redeemed? Like, you just wait and see.
Yeah, can you talk about some of the bands that that you kind of grew at First Avenue that are now huge?
Yeah, I mean, certainly like the last greatest Minneapolis success story would be Lizzo. She moved to Minneapolis. She was on tour, and somebody in the audience, not at another club called the Varsity, was like, Minneapolis loves you. You should move here. And so I guess she was like, okay. So she moved to Minneapolis and really like, worked in the local scene, did a ton of collaboration, a ton of like genre blending. We probably promoted 20, 30 Lizzo shows, everything from her group called The Chalice and Girl Party, to when she was, opening up for other acts, to her album release, until, she got called to the coast and left Minneapolis and became the amazing superstar icon that she is today. But over the years, there's certainly bands that we as an independent promoter, like, just took, we tried to help them develop their audience in Minneapolis or Minneapolis, St. Paul, as much as possible by, introducing the music to our friends at the radio station, by, going above and beyond to get people to the room, to get the right people in the room, to get the right local openers, to get the right people. bands like the Black Keys or Alabama Shakes, and just really like that we tried to grow. We have 6 rooms now under our company's banner, so we can grow a band from the entry at 250 capacity to 350 to 650 to 1550 to 2500. And so, we try to like be able to service artists, along the way, so that we can help them develop their career. Because, I do think history is so important, because we know who that audience is. We can talk to the audience that came before, and we can help a band grow more than, somebody that maybe doesn't have a history with that band.
Speaking of history, we know that First Avenue was put on the map by an incredible legend. And we just want to talk a little bit about him and how his relationship was with the venue at the time that he was, just coming up. And then as he became the mega influential star that he was. And then while he would, his relationship to Minneapolis, we all know, was huge. So we'd love to talk a little bit about that.
There was an aura in Minneapolis that like you could run into Prince at any time and you never knew where it was going to be. He could have been riding his bike or like record shopping at the Fetus, or he came to shows, all the time, like when he was in town all the time. And so like, you just never knew. And especially at the club, like we never knew when we were going to get like, I like to imagine it like we had a purple phone in the office, when Prince wanted to come down to a show, you like get the ring. It's like, okay, we're 2 blocks away. And like, we gather the team and run out and meet him and escort him and everything like that. And so it just felt like, now that we don't have him anymore, like this really magical existence, like just being in the same world or realm as Prince. I mean, he just loomed larger than ever across all of our business and across the whole city as well.
I, like many others, thought that he owned the
right
for so long.
I think everybody did.
Yeah.
It was people got very disappointed when they met me, I will say. I'm like, I'm sorry. I know it's not the same. But no, he would come. So he played most of his early shows. And I think a lot of it was because of Steve McClellan and this like anti-segregation, really like this ethos of equality and inclusivity that First Avenue had from its beginnings. And so he would definitely play a lot of his early shows. He developed really strong relationships with our DJs. So he would come in on the dance nights and he would, give a demo over and be like, hey, will you play this? I want to see how people respond to it. And so he really used it as like a testing ground. I mean, some of our DJs have like some of those early imprints. I saw one once of Erotic City. I was like, that is just basically the best thing in the entire world. But so, Prince was like at his heart, like the ultimate creator, just genius across the board. And so respectful, right? He like never swore. He believed in this like true equality of races and classes and socioeconomics, and like everybody was, equal in his eyes. And I think really instilled a lot of that spirit. And, a lot of those core values are still what we consider as the core values of First Avenue today. Even as he wasn't, he was playing arenas, he would still like, he rehearsed for his Sign of the Times tour there. There was always this idea, like when the phone rang, it could always be Prince. He might want to play at some point. He would call and like want to do a run of 5 shows, and then a day before be like, no, I changed my mind. And it was like, okay, can't be mad, it's fine. Even though we canceled 5 sold out shows for that, that's okay. We call him like our patron saint at First Avenue, because he just really like is so pivotal, and it's impossible to talk about First Avenue without thinking about Prince or considering him.
100%. How many times did he play there?
I think 10. The last one was 707. The last show we almost had was 2016, but it didn't happen. But also even in like the music community, like he was kind of pretty well known for when artists came into town, he would, invite them to Paisley, and they, spend all night talking about music and creating together. And he had so many of the local musicians he like took into his band and mentored and rose up, especially the minority communities here, where he's just like really took in a special, just influential in helping people and helping them rise and develop their sound and creating a career in Minneapolis.
Amazing. I want to ask you how, you talked about the core values that Prince had, and it moves us to today and Niva. And I want to hand it off to Mary Jo to talk about Niva. And I want to wonder, though, the core values that Prince had, did that contribute to you? Was that part of what was in your heart when you started Niva? And over to my MJ.
Yeah, picking up from that. First of all, I mean, obviously you were instrumental in forming the National Independent Venue Association, or NIVA. But first, we talked about why independent venues and promoters are important in the ecosystem of live music. And I think that's a good foundation for why you decided to form it when COVID hit. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to talk about like Prince and like kind of dotting the lines to Niva. Mm-hmm. And I think the really like most direct connection is just like, he was like in Minneapolis, like he was ours, he lived here, he created here. Like I said, he took local musicians under his wing and rose them up here. And he was ours. And so just that knowledge that like other cities, have that kind of relationship to the artists that live there and work there and create there, and how you can't replicate that if you have control sitting elsewhere, and this like intrinsic relationship that you have when you are completely accountable and you are a part of the community that you're trying to serve. And that was really the kind of foundation of Niva, is that like, we're all the local guys, which I really, a lot of times in our industry, there's this like pejorative kind of connotation. And like, I really just 100% reject that. I think there's nothing more honorable or like more important than being a company or being that local guy that's just set up to serve the people around you. I mean, that, again, I think a lot of it goes back to like growing up in the suburbs and coming down and having that knowledge of like, I can trust First Avenue, I'm going to be safe there. And, knowing that when I think about my responsibility as the owner now, it's keeping that kind of going, of like knowing that like, if something happens in that club, like, where I am, you know where to find me. When we're operating 17 hours a day, you can come down to the club and you can find me, like if you're owned by another company, there's the accountability is outside of the community. And so at the foundation of Niva was knowing that like how important First Ave is to Minneapolis. And there's, at the time I was like, there's gotta be 100 other First Aves, it's like there were 3,000 other First Aves, other local guys out there, dedicated, who had spent decades building up their scene and being the home to local artists and, connecting and building careers. And we were all like singularly at risk. And so I think that would be the relationship between Prince, but that was really at the foundation of Niva, is like, we were all pretty like, we love, everybody who owns a venue or is the local guy, like you do it for music and you do it for community. You don't do it for work-life balance or any other reason. And so, we were all very like working within our local communities, and maybe we saw each other at conferences, but there wasn't a lot of like communication going on. And so, maybe because we never had a need, or because it is like a very kind of competitive, very highly secretive industry. But then all of a sudden we were all shut down on 3 hours notice. And if we didn't band together, we weren't going to survive.
Yeah. And how many were in the original group, and how many people are in now? Like, how much has it grown?
So it started with town halls, kind of like this, like a webinar where I think the first one was a conference call. I didn't even have Zoom downloaded at the time. And it was really just like, holy shit, what the fuck is happening? And we would just gather. Sorry, you said I could swear.
That's fine.
We're
roadies.
We have this like conference room in a broom closet, basically.
Especially about that, Dayna. That is the sentiment of everybody.
Okay.
Holy shit, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah. We were like gathered around one cell phone. Like there were like 10 of us just being like trying to get in as much information as possible. Like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? And we were able to see, I had some friends, I happened to make some friends in China in January. And so I was FaceTiming with them through February, and like kind of having this perspective of like, holy fucking shit, what the fuck is happening? And I kept asking them, like, are your theaters open? And they're like, oh, our restaurants are open, our Starbucks are open, everything is getting back to normal. And I'd be like, well, are your movie theaters open? And they're like, oh no, those aren't open yet. And I was like, oh my God, we're gonna be the last to open. That's where that phrase came from. Like, everything else is gonna be open and we are gonna be the very last to open. And so I kind of started to get an idea that it wasn't gonna be quick. When we shut down on March 13th, started thinking like, okay, is it going to be 2 weeks? Is it going to be a month? Like we still walk by the club and it's like, all March shows postponed. It's like, well, I guess that's relevant again in January. But, Ani, so sorry, this is so super long-winded. So on these town halls, there were a bunch of promoters and venues being like, okay, what are, how are you guys reopening? Do you think it's going to be, May 15th or June 1st? And there were a few of us that were like, oh no one's prepared. Like, this is a true existential crisis moment. Like, no one is prepared for this. And so we really looked at it like it was the responsibility of those of us that maybe had a little broader perspective or were, had a little bit more kind of human resources. Like, we have a CFO and we have a bookkeeper and we were, financially like, or human wise, like better prepared to get a PPP loan and stuff like that. And we're like, we really have to watch out for these little guys because, independence and there was the human level of like, oh my God, these are my friends, like I've gone to conferences, like I have like relate to them in a way that you can't relate to people outside of your industry. You guys all know, right? Like, that don't do exactly what you're doing. There's this shorthand and this real, like, it was a real like community element of like, oh my God, if they hurt, I hurt. Like I have to help them. And also like, oh my God, every article you read about like a Live Nation or AEG and their future was like, it always ended with like, yeah, they're going to be hurt in the short term, but it's going to be okay because they're going to pick up so much market share when all the independents go under. I was like, oh my God, if all the independents go under, we're going to be left in a world that's only has 2 companies. And like, that's not good for anyone. It's not good for the artists to not have competition. It's not good for employees to not have competition. Like, we have to preserve an open and fair and a competitive market. So there was like a business element as well as the personal element also.
Yeah. And I thought that was interesting when we were prepping, we were talking about how you fought just as hard because of that to keep your competitors in business. Like, you could have easily been like, but it's like, you want to keep that ecosystem. And
the real interesting moments of like lobbying where there were 2 people on a call that like, I knew hated each other because they'd like bitched about each other to me, like maybe a year ago or whatever. Like, I know you hate each other and you're working together for like both of your survival. Because we took that initial survey and it was all blind. So we don't know who's at risk or who's fine, but it came back overwhelmingly, like 90% of independent venues did not have the cash flow to withstand the bills for the next, I think at the time it was 3 months even, or 6 months. And so we knew, like, we didn't know who it was, but we knew looking around that 90% of our friends were not going to make it. And so we fought just as hard to keep our competitor in business. I can't think of another time, that's happened. Certainly not in our industry.
No.
Yeah.
Dayna, continuing the conversation on kind of like where we are navigating this, can you tell us a little bit about Niva and kind of like the SOS you sent out? Like, what did you learn from the government, lobbying, et cetera, in that whole process?
Oh man. Sorry, I was just catching up on the chat and then like, yeah, exactly, Mark, like we love, like at First Avenue and most of the folks like us across the country, like we live for those club shows. We live for developing local artists. Like Lizzo, as much as we hate that she's not in Minneapolis anymore, like that's what we live to do, right? We live to help like first hear an artist and like grow them and help them find their voice and give them the stage to find their audience and like see the evolution of their sound, you know, and their just performance ability as they go from like, you know, opening band to like mega superstar. Like that's what we do at the heart. And you're right. And like without us and without that kind of that growth trajectory, like who, you know, what is the music industry like? And so I totally lost track of your question. Sorry. The chat's so fast.
No worries at all. It's definitely that theory, kind of like you got to crawl before you walk. You know,
Yeah.
That's why how important independent venues are for artists to really find their sound and navigate the markets to get to that bigger point. You know,
Yeah.
but getting back on track, we were talking about kind of like this SOS you sent out where you started working.
Yeah, this letter. So, but for our students that don't know, let's recap, because there was a letter that was recently sent out, sort of by Michael Rapino, the head of Live Nation, but with a big collaboration between a lot of different companies, to the president, urging him to use or utilize our industry in the best way possible to help the administer the vaccine. So that catch us up on that. Tell our students what started this letter. Where is this going? Why did you guys do this? What's happening with it?
Yeah. Oh my God. So many reasons. You know, first, I think, Mark, you'd asked, what did you learn about lobbying? And what we learned about lobbying is that local voice and like the squeaky wheel can sometimes, you know, break through and get the attention. And also like if you have a real true need and a really clear way of presenting options, that, you know, you can gain some success. And so I think that's what we're hoping for with the vaccination letter. I mean, first there's the basics of like, you know, we're Americans and we're American businesses and we want to help keep people alive, and vaccinating people will help keep people alive. I mean, there's also just the real acknowledgement that like we're closed because of a public health crisis, right? Where our industry is not completely shut down because we did anything wrong or there was like a flaw in our business model or like demand suddenly changed. You know, it's not like industrial revolution where we're like turned obsolete. Like exactly the opposite. Like we were fucking growing huge, and probably most people on here like, you know, not that we're working, we're like busier. There were more tours than ever before, but we're closed because of public health. And so our letter to President Biden was like, if we're going to close for public health, let us work for public health too. This is obviously like at the core of what we're concerned about. Or you'd have a bunch of people throwing, you know, raves and parties and keeping going, you know, but we all as an industry really said like, no, we gotta protect health. We gotta keep people safe. That is more important than our economics right now. And so our letter to him, you know, is like, okay, if obviously we've shown that that's our true concern, like let us go to work. We have resources that can be really helpful in this effort. And I think it's been frustrating to a lot of folks, especially, you know, you guys, tour managers who are like logistics experts and used to, you know, moving bands across the country in a very orderly fashion, and, you know, bands and crews and, you know, dozens of buses, etc., like, and loading in, loading out every night. It's like, let us do that for vaccination centers, you know, like put us to work. We have skills here, you know, you know, maybe it will take a lot less time for us to get off the ground than like, you know, we hear stories of like medical workers who are checking people in and, you know, people that aren't used to doing these types of logistics. So that was kind of at the crux of it. We're working on you know, everything is going through the states. And so now we're trying to organize into state teams and kind of put packages together where it's like, okay, give us the okay and let us open these vaccination stations, you know, because I don't know about you guys. I miss live music. I just want to see a show. I want to be in a
More
room.
than anything.
Right there with you.
More than
Many
anything.
reasons.
Yeah.
I'm like 5 foot tall, and then like I want people trampling over me. I want to stand behind a Norwegian giant and not be able to see. Like just get me back to a show. And so anything we can do to help make that happen faster.
I have a question for you, backing up to Save Our Stages for a second. Where whose idea was the whole hashtag SOS or Save Our Stages? And, just a little bit about, I just wanted to ask you if any of the experience that you got lobbying for Save Our Stages helped you when you parlayed that over to sort of writing that letter to President Biden. That was a question that I wanted to ask you personally.
Yeah, I mean,
first, where did say whose brilliant mind brought up Save Our Stages?
Stephen Chilton of the Rebel Lounge in Arizona.
Right on. Okay.
A marketing committee put together and they're like, okay, we need a hashtag, and they threw some names out there, and the word, I wasn't actually in that meeting, but the word stages is like so representative. It can be clubs, it can be theaters, it can be PACs, it could be dance. Just that's the heart of it, right? Is an artist standing up on a stage, performing for an audience. And so and obviously like the shortening to SOS and the urgent cry for help was
right.
an added.
And do you feel like getting into that whole thing and doing all that lobbying for the Save Our Stages Act sort of set you up for writing that letter to President Biden and launching that initiative?
Yeah, I mean, I think the letter is great. I mean, we got to start vaccinating people, right? That's the ultimate goal. So trying to, formulate the path forward for that. It certainly, wouldn't have had any frame of knowledge. I, had never worked nationally before Niva, right? It was like 100% Minneapolis, St. Paul. That's what I thought about 99% of the time. And what I was really focused on was just my local community. So working nationally has been interesting and certainly a new challenge, but rewarding also.
Also, one thing we'd like to point out is that you wrote the letter, which not a lot of our viewers know, which I think is a huge thing to take credit for. So
it was, it's all a team effort. I like working collaboratively, and there were contributions by many folks, but that's a good letter. I'm actually proud of it. So thank you.
It's a great letter. It's what all of us have been thinking about for months.
Yeah, it's so eloquently written, because you can tell that it was written by somebody that has been in our industry and know what the heart of our industry can do. And so you could tell by reading that. So thank you for representing us well.
That was like probably one of the most interesting learning experiences from the lobbying effort, was like realizing how people did not understand our industry at all. I mean, the conversations I had in April were just like, oh no, our economics is based on ticket sales. Like, no, we can't operate at lower capacity. Like 50% is like of a house sold is like abject failure, right? And like any other time. And now like you're telling me that's my max like potential, like what? And so just kind of explaining, not just the economics, but like how, our employees, like we use 1099 contractors. Like to us, that's an employee. That's how we pay people. And so that's why like a PPP program where you can only, it's based on W-2s is completely ineffective for our industry, because we pay people on 1099, like, and, just explaining that they're like, oh no, it might be a contractor to you, but that's like an employee to me. So like little kind of nuances like that. And they called us niche at the beginning, and we had to really we're like, I don't think we're niche. I think everybody loves music, Yeah. And I think if you don't love music, I think you understand what that theater opening brought to your town, So when we went in with like, we didn't really go in with arts organizations or, kind of like, this like flowery language of like what culture brings to an elevated society, right? Like we went in with our Chamber of Commerce, we went in with like the hotel next door, we went in with like the restaurant owner, who all talked about how this theater was responsible for the economic generation of their local community. And so that was really, that was our message. We never really considered SOS like an arts bill, and we considered it like a workforce driver and an employer, and that's what we really see as our benefits. Sorry.
No, we have plenty of time. There have been certain senators who have been very extremely supportive, and those senators, like, did they just naturally come on board with that, or were you targeting like certain people that you knew would be into supporting it? Or I'm curious as to how that works, or are they just like naturally really behind it?
Yeah. So the real unbelievable thing about Niva, and this is why I say it's all a group effort, and all credit due to like the 45 kind of precinct captains in their state that were like working basically full time on making this happen. We really we targeted everybody. I think if you're like a traditional trade association and you have maybe like one or two government relations executives who are like doing all the work, you have to be a little bit more targeted. But we were like, yes, New York and LA, but like Kansas and Texas and Missouri, like everybody, every single congressional office got our paperwork and talked to a local business owner and maybe an artist and maybe a chamber or whatever representative. Like we didn't we didn't target. We were just like, this is life and death for us, like help us. So we targeted everybody. And so John Cornyn became like our first champion from Texas. He, I think, saw, Austin has been more
He's the rep for Austin, by the way. So he was my rep when I lived in Austin.
Yeah, Austin has been more devastated, I think, than any city with just closures and just a combination of like what music means, right? But also like the risk for gentrification and for like a truly like a change in culture and a change in quality of life due to this crisis. And I think he saw what was happening and was like, okay, I think it's time for a bill for your industry. And then I, being in Minnesota, and I talked to Senator Klobuchar in her office, and I was like, well, if we're going to need a Democratic lead, I'm like, we got to ask Senator Klobuchar. I think she had her early vote rally at First Avenue in January when she was running for president, and I was like, I think she would be a great champion for us. And so we went to her to co-lead it, and she obviously became like the greatest champion of our industry anyone could ever ask for.
See Senator Schumer with SOS mask on at the inauguration. That was so cool. We were all like, yes.
I love it. Somebody I think earlier said that you have a branding company. It's like the one thing we're promoters, right? And so like if we're promoting legislation, we're gonna get out there and promote. So we went all out.
Well done. Well done. So we wanted to talk a little bit about how Niva is positioned for the future, and what you guys are going to, what are your plans, for how you're going to approach the upswing and return. And we also wondered if you were going to do any collaborative buying, like the way that the Arena Network has done in the past, where they might come together to do some buying or to do some marketing efforts. So is Niva going to do something like that?
So we are really, one of, I would say, the core values of Niva is to treat all venues or all members equally, and so we never, it's really important that any benefits to membership go to all clubs and promoters and festivals equally. So I don't think we would ever do something where like one venue, like a First Ave and Metro Chicago and 930 and Troubadour, like where they benefit and that benefit is not spread around all of the members. So I don't think a group buying, but again, it's not just my decision, so I might be talking out of turn here, but we're really, all independents on the same footing and giving all the same access to resources and knowledge. One thing that we're really excited about is the potential for like group insurance policies and like all the stuff that's like super boring, but like super important. A lot of people probably don't know, but at the end of 2020, a lot of people were dropped from their insurance there, especially their property insurance, as our like big buildings with expensive equipment sat empty in the midst of civil unrest. And so insurance actually like didn't really decrease that much, even as we weren't operating. So we want to help our members there by trying to maybe streamline the process. Another problem with insurance is that like hip hop shows are more expensive to insure than country shows, which is total fucking bullshit, because I think any venue operator knows like there are way more risky shows in hip hop. So we're really trying to do something about racial equity in insurance. And if you are maybe a minority owner, it's harder for you to get insurance. And so we really want to break down some of those boundaries. That's really important to us. We're also like trying to figure out ways that we can help the ecosystem, with equal access to health insurance, both for, so for our members to be able to offer it to their employees, which sometimes as a small business is cumbersome. We want to help folks be able to do that, but also offer health insurance options for artists and for 1099 contractors, because again, like that's how we pay people. And so we want to make sure that, that everybody in our ecosystem has access to those types of insurance. So those are the types of like group buying and ways that we're seeing about supporting our members.
That would be huge. That's the golden goose in our industry is that healthcare thing.
It sure is.
Yeah.
For those of us in America.
Right.
Yes.
For those of us in the US, to clarify.
Yeah, right. Everyone else is probably like, I can't believe they have to deal with this shit.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
I think we have some time for some questions, and there's a question in our Q&A. Just going back to the Biden letter, did you guys get a response?
We haven't been so we've been talking to members of the administration, and it's really going on a state by state level. That's how the vaccine rollout is. So now we're trying to put together state teams to go into state governments with like, here's venue options, here's logistical experts, maybe here's a third party medical provider. We can do the whole package. Let us do this. So that's what we're kind of focused on this week, I would say, is putting those packages together and trying to test it out in a few sites. The government is still probably a few weeks away from having the actual vaccines. And so our timing is actually really perfect. And anyone who knows me knows, like I only act with urgency. Anything I do, they call me like Dayna ASAP Frank. So I'm like, let's do it. I don't understand. Why isn't it done yet? And so I feel like by the end of this week, we'll have the, the path forward pretty
Dayna,
well.
do you have any sense of how your efforts and offers of assistance will be received by state governments? Have they responded? Any sense of how it will be received?
I think really positively, I hope. I mean, we have all of the necessary ingredients to like make a really meaningful help with this effort, right? I mean, like it's probably for everyone on here that's like a logistical expert, like watching what's happening is like a little bit like, what? Come on, let us help. So
we're surely melting, knowing that we could get in there and wrangle the job so well, and standing by and unable to, bring all our resources to the table. It's definitely I know I speak for tons and tons of touring and logistics professionals who are just so frustrated that their hands are tied.
And
yeah.
It must be, I'm sorry to interrupt, Dayna, but it's realistic. It's happening in other places. The Hydro in Glasgow has been a field hospital since last year and have been operating and will be through this year. I'm sure there are many others in operation around the world as well. So it's reasonable to assume these locations can be converted for that use.
Yeah, and you think about it, we have an extra element for this effort too, because what I was reading is part of the problem is like convincing people to take the vaccine. And so that's where it's like, wait, we're promoters. Like we promoted a bill, like let us promote the vaccine, let's get our artists involved, right? Getting a vaccine doesn't have to be boring. I mean, you could take a tour, COVID safety, obviously, but like somebody said, like you get a shot and a shot, like our businesses are set up for like, late night, like we're not restricted to like, daytime hours. If you have somebody that like doesn't have a flexible work schedule, like we can make it so that, it's a little bit more, these vaccines are like a little bit more accessible. And so I think there's really creative ways that our industry can help too, and outside of just opening up our doors. And I think that's really interesting for us to start exploring too.
As somebody who has a needle phobia, a shot and a shot sounds really up my alley. Yeah.
Yeah, you could do a shot, the drink shot.
A few shots. Yeah. I'm gonna need a couple.
Customer incentives all day.
Right?
So Elise has a question in the chat. Is there a list of groups by state? She said that she knows a person who's been trying to get involved with high logistical skills, but she hasn't been able to get connected. So is there anything you can recommend to our gang who would like to get involved, how they might, who they might reach out to, or what you think that process would be?
Yeah, so We Make Events is the group. Folks are probably familiar with them. They did Red Alert when they lit all the buildings red. They're primarily, I think, production folks.
Mm-hmm.
That they have a state-by-state network and kind of like district director systems. And then I'm also happy to connect. I'm not sure what your like TPA or with you guys too, to start, kind of matching folks up on the ground also.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Last, we're doing a sweeping round of questions.
I had
Anybody?
Well, I was curious, what's happening at your venue now? Did I see you guys had like a small little intimate shows going on?
Yeah, we had a residency of a local artist from Duluth, Minnesota named Charlie Parr. I think we were set to do it as a live stream. He has always done a January residency. He usually did it at the Turf Club. And the Turf Club, unfortunately, had some really significant fire damage in the civil unrest from earlier this summer. So we did it in the main room, and we were just going to do it as a live stream. And then the governor changed the mandate and said, I think we can have 150 max capacity. And so we sold a couple tables at first. I mean, no one wants, like I said, public health above all else. But that relationship, the show for an artist perspective, is just so different with people in the room. It wasn't like a financial decision. It was really this like improving the experience. And like, there's such a symbiotic relationship between performer and fan, and feeling that energy and having the applause and the screaming and just that, it just, even from the live stream, it became much, just like 1 + 1 = 3. So we had a few people in the room.
That's amazing. Do you think that as we tiptoe back into doing live shows, that will become more of a thing? I feel like that's going to turn into a thing where it's not even just a local artist, but like huge names want to come in and do a small show for 15, 20 people, and selling packages of tables for groups. Like, that's a really interesting idea, and maybe is part of the baby steps forward into bigger shows.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really up to the artists. I view, especially as like a promoter and a First Avenue, like our job is to make the artist's dreams come true, right? And to be the absolute, best host, and to make the show happen exactly how the artists want to see happen. So, I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that question, but what I can say is, like, if the artist wants to, absolutely, we're going to do it. We're going to do it exactly how they want to do it, and make that happen. It's not like a sustainable financial model, so there probably be some kind of sponsorship or some kind of, if it is like a full-fledged production and it's a fun to do. It's a great community builder. It's a great way to like keep employees paid, but it's not like sustainable. It's not like you're going to see venues popping up that only do 15-person show plus live stream,
We have an interesting question in the chat from Maddie, who's asking, knowing what you know now, how can independent venues prepare for future left field hits?
What a great question. Join Niva. No. COVID was so left field. I mean, it's just, I remember we at First Avenue, because again, I was talking to my friends in China. And so we had our first meeting, I think mid-February. And we were like, what can we do to prepare? Knowing now it seems so like even optimistic, right? Being like, okay, we might be closed for 6 weeks. What can we do? And we were even like, there was like nothing. We're like, okay, well, I guess, pay essential bills only, right? Because it's going to be a cash flow crisis. But there's really like, what can you do? But I think making these connections, and even like, TM 101, having this as a resource, like, holy crap, how much better would everyone be if, having these archived and being able to like go back and watch the 64 episodes, like what an amazing service you guys are doing. And I think even just these like relationships and, developing these networks is hopefully going to make us a more sustainable and healthy ecosystem.
You know what I like about you, Dayna? Because, okay, time and time again, as we've heard your stories over the years, you've been put into these huge situations that maybe you didn't quite know what to do, but you really just jumped into the fire time and time again, and everything was figure outable to you, and you just went ahead and like figured it out with the team and are just taking those baby steps forward, nothing stopping you. And so it's very impressive, and I think an amazing lesson for our students to take away from. And thank you again for being here today. This has been an incredible lesson, and we're all really excited to see what happens with not only with Niva and the Save Our Stages Act, but maybe as an industry, what we can all do to sort of help in the bigger picture of things. So this has been really cool conversation. Everybody give it up for Dayna Frank.
And speaking of help, Dayna Frank, speaking of help, Jim.
Yeah, before we sign off, Dayna, can you just talk quickly about the donations program for Niva, as well as the Twin City Music Community Trust, so we can, if people want to help out with that stuff, and a little information on that.
Yeah. First, I just want to add, everything is figure outable. There's always a solution. I totally believe that if you work with other people and just surround yourself with good people, I think that's like, again, I can't say enough about like everyone at First Avenue and how like, it's not me, right? It's like, we have the best people in the entire industry at First Ave, and Niva was like the best people in the national industry, like working at Niva, and like good, smart people who, act with urgency and then say, yes, I can, like can figure any of this shit out. So I wanted to put a quick plug in. First Avenue runs a 501c3 called the Twin Cities Music Community Trust. And we're doing small dollar grants to touring professionals and live music industry professionals. So
very important people.
If you are an artist or a bartender or IATSE or anyone that makes over 50% of your living based on ticketed live music shows, and you live in Minnesota, you can go out on the road, but like you have to have a residence in Minnesota. We are open for grants, and that's tcmusiccommunitytrust.org. And so we did our first round of emergency funds in, I think, April, we got them out. And then we are doing another round now, because obviously this is going way longer than we all thought it would. And Niva also, kind of coming off of that, Niva has an emergency relief fund for venues, promoters, and festivals that are, at the end of their rope. So that's, I think, at nivassoc.org. You can find the info there. And thank you guys for all of what you're doing. I think this is like the coolest thing. And I wish we had like another hour and a half where you could tell me everything I could do at First Avenue to make it better for artists and for TMs. We're working on putting in showers. That's my goal for when we have some downtime here.
Oh, you heard it here first.
That's a big one.
Everybody can get a hot shower before going straight into their bus when there's minus 20 outside.
Yeah.
Instead of going to a hotel.
Sauna didn't get so gross. I'd talk about that, but that's sketchy.
Dayna, thank you for joining us, and thank you for everything that you're doing for the industry at large. Thank you for the Twin Cities Trust Fund, for our peers that are affected by, this continuing pandemic. Thank you, and thank you again.
Imagine how amazing it's going to be when we reopen. I mean, it's just going to be a party every night, and we're never going to take it for granted again.
Can't wait to have you back. Have you come back. We'll wait and see how all the progress you've made throughout this year, and we'll have to have you back on, talk about it.
Shout out to Kira Finkenberg. Kira, it was great to see you in the room. Thank you for joining us today. What a pleasure and an honor to have you. Kira of Amazing Concert Marketing.
Well, Everyone, thank you so much for being here with us today as we wrap. Again, make sure to follow us on all our socials for all our upcoming webinars. Like always, we're here every Monday, same time. We'll post our upcoming webinars this week. And yeah, make sure to subscribe, like our YouTube channel, and we'll see you next week.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Bye.